Can I get the back?
Yep, again. What's a Xena?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Lovecraft. Shouldn't see. Yeah. It's kind of heavy traffic.
Thank you.
Bill Barnes, and I'm the artist and co-writer of a comic strip called Unshelved. And is my co-writer Shane here? Is he here? Not here yet. 5 years ago, we started this comic on the plane home from Comic-Con. He's terribly scared of flying, and so to distract him, we started making up a comic strip. And it's been an excellent ride. It's been the third greatest learning experience of my life. The other two being marriage and parenthood. Now you can walk into, seriously, and you can walk into any bookstore and find hundreds of books about, marriage and parenthood, but there really isn't a guide to how to make a webcomic. And so we're here to change all that. In this building are some of the most talented and successful web cartoonists and, of course, cartoonists in the world. And so over the next 3 days, we're going to have an even dozen of them. They'll be here at your disposal to pick their brains and other body parts. And let's see. So here's how we're going to structure it. So today we're basically going to focus on getting started. The mechanics of making a comic, the sort of basic beginning decisions that we make. We're also going to touch on the other two subjects we're going to get to over the next couple of days, building your audience and making money. But for the most part, we're going to focus on getting started. I know you all have lots of questions, so I'm just going to introduce everybody quickly, ask a couple of questions, and turn them over to you. So from my left here, Dave Kellett is the master of Sheldon. Mr. John Rosenberg bringing us Goats. Brian Fee is Mom's Cancer. And of course, Phil Folio of Girl Genius. So panelists, would you please just take a couple minutes and talk about what brought you to publishing on the web as opposed to, or in addition to, other mediums? We'll start with Dave.
Right, for me, I was studying in grad school in England in 98, 99, and for me, I was preparing for a sort of syndicate package, a traditional sort of comic strip syndicate package, and wanted to share it with family back home, and the easiest possible way I could do it was to put it on the web. So from that inauspicious start of sharing it basically with people across the pond, I then sort of found joy as that got nailed around. It's the bad joke of, two people told their friends and they told their friends. And so within a short while, I realized that it was a really workable and interesting way to distribute comics.
My entry into webcomics was kind of accidental, especially since I didn't know that they existed at the time. I started Goats about 9 and change years ago. And I think there were maybe 4 or 5 webcomics at the time that were regularly publishing. And I didn't know about any of them, but I was rooming with a guy named Philip, who was also a character in the strip, and he suggested that I draw a comic strip about our life and put it on our little 5 megs of web space that you get with your dial-up account on screen. And it kind of took off on its own. It was a very strange thing. And I said, oh, this is great. This is a great springboard to syndication and that sort of thing. And I prepared some syndication packages, and rightfully they were all rejected. The stuff I was doing was terrible. But I got one letter back from Jay Kennedy, who is the editor of any other comic strip in the newspaper, and I said to myself, you know what? If this is the quality of the people I would be working with if I was syndicated, I'm probably better off on my own. And it turns out that being on the web and doing your own thing has a lot of advantages that syndication cannot match, so I'm pretty happy where I am. I have never ever looked back.
Jake Kennedy's been very nice to me in the past.
No, I didn't say he wasn't a nice guy. I just, he doesn't like apples.
Mom's Cancer ended up on the web because I had a story that had to get out, and I couldn't think of any other way to get it out. Initially, I put it on the web. Actually, it sounds a lot like these guys. Really, just to solicit feedback from friends and people I knew who loved and respected cartooning. I just put it out there and said, "Go take a look at this. Tell me what you think." And they told their friends, told their friends, and that kind of grassroots build was really what led to everything else, including the print book and last year's Eisner Award and everything. It all started just by putting it on a site, not doing any advertising, just having it spread the word of mouth. One thing I discovered about the web comic process or medium that I didn't expect going in was it was really ideal for the kind of serialization I ended up doing. When I first put Mom's Cancer on the web, it was about half done. And whenever I finished a new few pages, I put it on the web and add to the website. And it was perfect for that. People could check in every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks and find out what was going on. And over the course of a year, the audience just came back to read the next chapter in our life story. That wasn't really intentional, but it worked out really well. I can't imagine any other medium that you could do that.
Well, for me and Girl Genius, pretty much was a case of following my own advice. For the last couple of years, people have been coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I want to break into comics, and I got this idea. How do I start? What's the best way to make a comic book?" And I'm like, why in the world would you want to make a comic book? I mean, the audience for traditional comic books is shrinking at an incredible rate. Most of the people who, your story is targeted for would never step inside a comic book shop. Why don't you put it up on the internet? That way everybody can see it for free, and if it's good, you'll get customers. And, all of a sudden, well, it got to a point where I realized, why don't I do that? So we did, and holy cow, it's the best thing we ever did. It increased our readership by a factor of 8, and it tripled our sales.
It's amazing how people are finally coming around to realize.
It was just marvelous. That's how we did it. Why?
So any questions about what you've heard so far? Yes.
Tying into what you were saying just then, is webcomics just about ultimately selling comic books, or do you think, is there some joy in just the webcomics? Because I collect comics and I like having it and collecting it and looking at the pretty pictures, but it's not the same on the internet because I'm just clicking through and I want to spend 5 seconds there and then I'll go on.
Well, that's certainly why you put out collections, because people like to own things, and a darn good thing too, because that's how I pay my rent. But no, as a matter of fact, webcomics, it's an incredible medium because you can do all kinds of different things. There's some of the most exciting stuff that's being done in webcomics. We'll probably never see traditional print. They'll have to, if they're going to put a collection, they'll have to be like on a DVD because they've got infinite canvas scrolls or flash or something like that.
And to add on to that, the traditional sort of argument for print, and I'm the same way, is that God, I can hold it in my hands, I can take it in any room I want to go to. If I go to the beach, I can take it there. But the experience is totally different on the web. There's no argument. But in a lot of ways, it's better. I mean, if I discover Goats tomorrow and I've never read it before, I can dive into all the archives and read it overnight. Not sleep that day. And a lot of people do. You'd be surprised. Not just with Goats. I mean, with webcomics in general. But mostly with Goats. I found that once you're in John's realm, you can't. Anyway. But it's totally different, and it's incredibly immersive. You become part of the world. I mean, when you read, say, Calvin and Hobbes in a newspaper, you're reading it for an incrementally small period of time, over years. And you can't jump back, but you can with webcomics. You can completely dive in, you can get to know the author, you can get to know the fullness of the characters. So in a lot of ways, it's a more immersive and more satisfying experience, I think, for comics.
It allows for a much different narrative structure also, whereas traditional newspaper comics, I come from a newspaper strip comic, direction and tradition. And some of the limitations in newspaper comics are that you have to fit everything into little tiny panels, and it has to be, crisp black and white, and you can't really have a lot of continuity, because if, anything complex happens, mothers in Kansas are going to get confused. So this allows me to do, I can do double size if I want, I can do triple size, I can add a little animation, I can do full color. If I want to refer back to something that happened a few months ago, people can just click through the link to the previous one. And it's allowed me to kind of grow what Goats is. It's allowed it to change in nature. And I think that it would be impossible for me to do that in a newspaper setting as well.
Kind of along the same lines, I think a person starting a web comic or thinking about starting a web comic really has to have kind of an identity crisis about what it's going to be. Is it going to be something? You got to think ahead. You got to plan. Is it going to be something that you want to eventually see print? I wanted my work, I think, to eventually see print. I kind of have the same print bias that these other guys talked about. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And again, talk about the infinite canvas and some of these other kind of innovations. There's so much potential in webcomics, and what kind of irritates and frustrates me is so many webcomics creators have this wonderful infinite medium to work with, and they're still drawing in 4 little panels with black and white or grayscale. Or they're drawing comic book-shaped pages. Hey. That's what I'm saying. You got to think about what you want it to be, and if you're going to reprint it as a book, then you better have something head-shaped.
There's something to be said, though, for following the old style and structure of comics, because it's a proven, time-tested thing. People like 4 panels in a row. They want their little bite of humor. So it's not, you shouldn't say, oh, because you're on the web, you should go off and do an infinite canvas or something. But
I was corresponding with a guy last week who came up with a bunch of scripts for 9-panel comics. And I said, well, you're not going to sell 9-panel comics to a newspaper syndicate. You're not going to sell individual 9-panel comics to a comic book company. That's what ought to be on the web.
Yeah.
Now, you don't see a lot of 9-panel comics around, put it on the web, it's perfect. And so that's what I'm saying. If you think ahead about what you want to do with it, what you want to be, what you want your work to be when it grows up, I think you can maybe get off on the right foot there.
Just setting off what Brian said, one of the pieces of advice I give is make sure, if you even imagine that you might want to print your stuff later, make sure when you're creating stuff that it's print ready. Don't do stuff you're setting to DPI.
Yeah, do a print resolution first and shrink down for the web, keep it calm.
And if you're even close to a style or an approach that could be reprinted in print, I would suggest that you keep that in mind and work towards print, because print can be very lucrative, especially with self-publishing. It makes up a healthy chunk of a lot of people's business.
Question over there.
Do you think, since most web comics are free, do you think that if you start to create a web comic and it evolves over time, that it's almost a given that you can sell print versions of it?
If your audience is big enough, there's no doubt.
I'll throw out a number, and John might, or Phil or Brian might be able to contradict this, but I think in general, 10% of your audience will physically buy something of what you put on the web. So if you have 10,000 readers, 1,000 books. If you have 100,000 readers, 10,000 books, or T-shirts, or stickers, or something physical to support that strip.
That actually sounds kind of right to me too.
It does, and the thing is that if they really like it, then they'll buy multiple copies.
No, at Christmas time though, you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
Especially at Christmas, you'll find people buying 17 copies.
Yeah, everybody get that big Christmas cake.
Also, you're running around the house baking more than any other Jew on the planet.
Seriously, another big benefit, the thing to remember is that if you are a webcomic person and you decide to get your book published, probably your best bet is to be a self-publisher. There are a tremendous number of headaches and a tremendous number of hassles, but the bottom line is that no other publisher is going to care as much about your work as you are. You can keep that book in print forever. You can make sure that there are ads and something, that there's living work on that property being created. Whereas, another publisher, after the initial rush, they'll be like, is there something else we can do with this warehouse space? Let's remainder these and get them pulped and move on to something new.
And it's not just for books, it's anything involved with the process. If you can do it yourself, you're going to make more money, and you're going to get complete total control, and you're not going to have someone else looking out for their interests screwing you over. So if you can do it yourself.
But that's a problem.
I just did a run of action figures. We did this ourselves, we didn't have to go through Hasbro or whatever, and I get to keep all the money when we sell them. It costs a little bit of money up front, but it takes money to make money.
On the other hand, I have a lot of respect for what might be a more traditional editorial process. I know, my editor and my publisher added a lot to the print version that I liked without any betrayal of principle or compromise on my part. That, you're working with the right people if you do your thing.
That's true. If you get, it depends on what you want. There are certain things, for instance, if, I'll just throw something out. If H.K. Rowling had decided that she was going to just do Harry Potter through her own little small press, it wouldn't be what it is. You need big money behind something, pushing it, in order for it to make even more money. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that if what you want to do is make money. And I do. I want to make money.
Yeah, and God forbid you should make a living off your comics.
Yeah,
So don't take that as a mark of shame. That's actually a wonderful thing.
The stereotype of the artist starving in his garret was put forth by publishers who had to pay them. There is no dignity in poverty.
And just so you know, in terms of self-production, the profit ratio can sometimes, depending on where you print, and by that I mean China, profit ratios can sometimes be 15 to 1, which is pretty substantial. So just keep that in mind.
Question here.
Just want to see if John would take on diffusing the hand grenade of micropayments.
Micropayments.
Very briefly, because we're not really going to focus on the money. So
Okay, I'll go quickly. Basically, micropayments don't currently work. There's one.
yeah, he's going to diffuse this, all right.
There's one company doing them. Very few people are signed up for it. There's a $3 minimum to get started, and if you only want to buy one 25-cent micropayment comic, you've got $2.75 left in your account doing nothing. There are hurdles. It's difficult to sign up. All the people say, oh, it's only a 1 or 2 step process. It's still more effort than it's worth for me to get a 25-cent item. I would rather have someone get a $17 or $18 shirt or a book or action figure and make a lot more money off that one transaction than try to do hundreds and hundreds of 25-cent transactions to make up that same amount. I did an experiment. I offered one mini comic online, and I think I made $60 over the course of like 6 months on micropayments.
Is that good?
No, that's terrible. If you can make enough comics to make $60 off of each of them and make your living that way, then go for it. But it's not a very smart way to make money. I would rather give it away for free, let all the readers who aren't paying me be my evangelists and go and tell their friends and build a very large audience, and let some of them buy merchandise and put everything behind a content wall where no one can learn about it or appreciate it or enjoy it or share it. So.
Okay. Yes.
My friend and I are just starting out a webcomic, and I guess I was wondering if you guys had, I don't know, like 2 or 3 most important things to know or focus on or care about when you're just starting.
We want to make one of those little books you buy at the checkout counter. Words of wisdom.
Smile every day. Tell a stranger they're great. Words of advice. I think like any artistic endeavor, wait, I should do this. With any artistic endeavor, and Ryan touched on this, is that first and foremost, it's going to sound so cheesy. It's got to come from the heart. It's got to be something that you have to say, that you want to say, that you believe in. If you're trying to pitch it for an audience, if you're trying to craft something that will appeal to someone, you'll get mileage out of it, but eventually your heart won't be in it. So just in the first initial steps, that's just my one tidbit.
Concentrate on making the comic good. Make sure that it is unique. Don't go and make another Penny Arcade, because Penny Arcade already does it better than you can. Make the characters fun, and not always fun, but sometimes tragic. That's cool too. just concentrate on making the best comic possible, and everything else will kind of follow. You also want to make the site accessible and easy to navigate. You want to make sure that it's easy for them to buy things. Basically the most important thing is just to make a good comic that's original, that's going to stand out, and people are going to say, I'm going to go to this guy because the other 20,000 webcomics out there are not as good as it.
My advice would be more mundane, because I'm thinking, when you ask the question, I think back to things I wish I'd known when I started. And it's to me, it's just the technical stuff. Somebody already touched on it. Think ahead down the road, and if, for example, don't scan everything at 72 DPI because you think it's just going to be nothing but web. So, scan it at 600 or 1200.
That's just black and white.
Put those away. Just put them away. And maybe you'll never use them, but maybe a year from now you're gonna have to dig those out. I had to do some stuff. Yeah. When I went from web to print, I thought I knew print because I'd written magazine articles and I'd done stuff for print before, but book is a whole nother ballgame. And so if you think there's a possibility of it down the road, you don't want to be digging out those 72 DPI files and trying to recreate stuff later. So lay the groundwork, lay the foundation, and then all this other stuff. Yeah, it's got to be from the heart, and it's got to be different. And the nice thing about web work is it can be a niche audience. You don't have to make everybody happy. If you hit the right audience just right, and you speak to them, there's 300 million people in the United States and 6 billion in the world. Get an audience.
Oh wait, I got one more. Merchandise, important. If you're making t-shirts, which you should, because they sell really well, simple designs, iconic, and make sure that people can understand them without having read your comic strip.
And just one note on that: if you're making merchandise before you've made your first 5 comics, make them comics.
I already have merchandise ready for my next comic strip, which may not even be out yet.
Yeah, a lot of what they said is good. Make stuff that you want to read is how I summarize that. Save everything. Scan everything. Save everything. And this is very important since there's 2 of you working together, and I doubt you're married.
We are best friends forever.
God, how many times have I heard that? Figure out who's doing what, who gets what, write it down. Because, as my lawyer basically bitch slapped into me, money changes everything.
So there is money.
Well, yeah. And, best friends forever, you bet. But, figure out who came up with what, and who's responsible for what, and who owns the copyrights and trademarks, and, who can sign off on merchandising deals, and, what's the name of the band, and figure that stuff out, and do it legal before it's a big deal.
Yeah. Make sure there's a good loophole in there so you can screw them over. Shit with the kidney.
This is great stuff. But there's a trap I see some people falling into, and that is they got an idea, and they're making the action figures, and they're going to a lawyer, and they're spending $5,000 on contracts, and they form a corporation, and they've passed everything under the trademark and the copyright office, and they haven't drawn a damn thing.
Well.
So
The first rule, and this is the first rule of creating anything.
Is you do not talk about creating anything.
No. That's very true, actually. The first rule is don't fucking talk about it, do it. The second rule, I guess, or rule 1A, don't suck. You'd be surprised how many people violate rule 1A.
Before we take more questions, I wanted to make sure we get a little more foundational stuff and I'll return to it. Can you guys briefly describe the path that each of your scripts takes from conception to posting on your site? I just want to sort of focus on how do you draw it, what tools do you use, that sort of thing. Yeah, start at the end.
Well, Girl Genius is written by my wife Kaya and myself, and we've got this thing. We're like 5 years ahead on the story from what you see. So we pretty much talk it out, and yeah, that's the rough bones. But you know, on the actual story, we're still fine tuning it as we go along and create new characters and stuff like that. So we sit down and figure out what the next sequence is going to be. Then I do a breakdown just on, you know, typing paper or something, and just, you know, thumbnail sketches. And we talk that over and see how that goes. And if it's cool, then I draw it. Then she does the first layout of the script. And while that's being done, it goes off to our colorist, Cheyenne Wright. And he does all the colors on the computer. Then once we've decided what the actual dialogue is, Kaya puts the dialogue on in the computer using Comic Craft fonts. They are fabulous and easy and very readable. Lettering in comics, it's called the invisible art, because if it's good, no one cares. And if it's bad, there's just a certain level of legibility that everybody's used to, and if it's not there, then okay. After that, Cheyenne sends in a low res of the colors, and we approve it and see whether anything needs tweaking, and if not, then he downloads it to us, and it all gets put together. Kaya, who is the person who maintains and runs the website, posts it, and there it is. When she does that, she, again, like I said, she sets it all up as if it were a book being done to print. The black, the artwork is not inked. This is all pencils that are scanned, and the color work is done at 300 DPI.
Right. My process is maybe just a little different, because mine is a biographical memoir kind of thing. So it was based on.
Show the audience the pages so they can see what it looks like.
Sure. Let's try something random here. Horizontal pages, actually drawn to be proportional to a computer monitor. That was my concession to the internet. So it's based on real life, and I took a lot of notes, let them set and simmer for a while, of everything strange or interesting that happened in my family, which was a lot. Cut out a lot. I joked that I made my book 50% shorter just by cutting out everything about me whining. So you know, the script developed over time. It was important to me that it be a script or a story with a beginning, middle, and end, an actual narrative rather than just a diary of random events. Once I thought I had a pretty good sequence together, I'm an old school cartoonist, very old school. I just sketched out a thumbnail, took the thumbnail to a 9x12 piece of 2-ply Bristol board, penciled it, did the lettering myself, inked the lettering, inked the art. At that point, I popped it into Photoshop and apparently scanned it at some random resolution. But at that point, then you know, I'd add the shading and a bigger grayscale of the color. I also ended up doing a ton of editing in Photoshop. More and more as went on. Anything that would have in the old days been done with X-Acto knives and rubber cement, I did in Photoshop. And boy, it's a great editor for me. But I don't do any drawing on the computer. And then to the website.
My comic is created in macro, so I just hit a key. Yeah, and that triggers a laser, which draws the comic directly onto the internet. My process is a little different than it used to be. What I used to do was I would sit around and ingest some substances. And I've got a kind of now I've got a long story arc, which may run a year, it might run until 2012, haven't quite decided yet. But I know basically it's a very loose framework. And I can't stress that enough. Keep your framework loose. If you tie yourself into too much stuff, if you're doing kind of an ongoing thing, you won't have room for sudden inspiration to kind of take a turn here or to add something. So I know basically the direction that I'm going in a given day. I know what the event needs to happen to get the characters from point A to point B. And I also want to include something fun and good for the reader. Something awesome has to happen in every strip. Either that's a really good joke, or a really good fight scene, or somebody needs to fall into a chasm, or something cool has to happen. And then I write around that. So I'll have the characters involved, and I'll write a basic script in their interactions, and then I'll go back to the script and punch up each of the lines and try to make each one fun sounding or funny, or add a little value at that initial stage. After I've done that, and I've kind of separated out which interactions are going to which panels, pencil out the whole thing in non-repro glue on Bristol board, go over it in Pigma Micron technical markers, scan the whole thing into Photoshop, and then I add color in Photoshop, a lot of flood fills, and touching up of the line work and that sort of thing, which is very, very important because I can't really draw. So I have to just do it over and over and over again until it's right. And then it just gets FTP'd onto the whiteboard.
So for me, I'm the process John used to have, a little more traditional. And like a lot of cartoonists, it kind of starts with a scrap of paper. So that's probably the most critical thing a cartoonist can always have, is a damn scrap of paper in their pocket. So keep that with you always. And I just by luck of the draw, I happen to have some stuff with me. I was reading an economist article this morning, which sparked an idea. So you can see I literally just jotted it down on the top of the article, tore the page out so I can remember what the idea was. And then this afternoon, during a break, I basically draw it in pencil on vellum Bristol board, which I basically cut in half. I will ink that up with a variety of India inks, scan that like Brian does, clean it up. If it's a Sunday, color it, and then post it to the web. And I'm very technologically savvy, so I know that the HTML fairies hand deliver it around the world. No, I have no idea what happens after that. Something with HTML, computers, I believe there's a pig involved somewhere in the process. I'm not sure, but that's me.
I wanted to add a little advice to our advice giving session, and that was to back up. All of us are doing this computer stuff, and I had one of those hard drive crashes, and I lost 6 months worth of work. Now, that was when I was drawing with a brush on paper, so I was able to rescan. I had to kind of do all the futzing in Photoshop all over again, but at least they were there. Now I draw directly on a computer, and if I did that again, I'd be gone. So I have actually a very expensive little backup system because I don't even want to lose 1 day's worth of work. That's my little
External hard drives aren't even that expensive these days. So
Yeah.
$200 and you're safe.
Okay, Gary.
I got a question, it's more for the audience. How many of you are here primarily because somebody is up on the panel whose work you really like, and how many of you are here primarily because you want to start a webcomic yourself?
So the right way to answer that question.
That's two questions.
Yes, please raise your hand to navigate. Okay, so if you're here because you're a fan of someone primarily because you're a fan of someone up here, please raise your hand. All right, and now raise your hand if you're here to learn about webcomics. Okay. That was the right answer.
Hey, say you got your fabulous comic, you made it great, it's unbelievable. How do you get it out? Like, how do you get people to
That's the subject of tomorrow's session.
Mass distribute?
That's the subject of tomorrow's session. But anyone quick advice to that subject?
Travel back to 1997 when you're the only one doing it.
And Kashalka's advice was be the first.
My advice is sort of be good. If you build it, they'll come. I mean, I have no advice to give on this because I didn't work at it. People just came and found it, and my audience grew. And if you got something people want to read, they'll find it. Well, I can't. That's the best I can do.
Well, that's pretty much it, yes. Build your audience until you get to sufficiently large numbers, or you've got enough money that you can start blowing it on publishing collections. And then solicit it through the traditional comics market, which is Diamond Comics. Diamond is for us. Now I've had a reputation in the comics field, so I've got a bit of a head start there. But Diamond's pre-orders pay for our print runs. So it's a it's a solid deal. Everything I sell over the web, it's profit.
But first you have to have an audience, right? That's the question.
The audience, yeah, the audience has got to be there.
You there in the back? Yes.
This is actually kind of a quick, more technical question. I remember, Phil, you talked about using Autocraft fonts.
Yeah.
Now, my webcomic that I do is actually all the text to put it in Photoshop, and right now I'm kind of working with craptastic, default fonts. Do you have any recommendation for fonts that you like, or sets of fonts you can get, or anything like that?
My recommendation is you do the footwork and find what works for you, because otherwise you'll have his font.
Right. And fonts, as they're intended to do, have moods. So find the font that fits the mood that you want to impart.
Yeah, we use 5 or 6 different fonts in Girl Genius.
There are also services where you can create your own font. You fill out a form with your handwriting and they'll make a font for you. Lambot is also really good. They've got a lot of nice fonts.
I urge you to consider doing it yourself.
Yeah.
Consider doing it yourself, because maybe it's kind of an old school Amish approach to cartooning, but I think there's a ton of personality in handwriting.
Yeah.
What I find, I also hand letter, and what I find is that my writing is much better when I hand letter, because it's painful, and it forces me to use the minimum number of words.
That's very true.
Inverse to that, there's a really great thing with fonts is that as you're lettering, if it doesn't work, you can change the dialogue at the last.
Oh, yes.
Which is really helpful.
Back there.
Basic question, PC or Mac?
PC or Mac, I think yes. PC?
Was PC, now Mac.
Okay, everyone in the audience, raise hands, PC.
Yeah.
Okay, raise hands, Mac. Yeah, it's actually about half and half. And that's vastly disproportional for Macs in the greater community. And as everyone knows, Macs tend to be used more in the arts. So yeah, you can do everything in either. So
OS2.
yeah, Amiga on the side there.
I was wondering, is allowing rampant reposting of your comics always a good thing, usually a good thing, or do any of you have any philosophies towards
I'm already giving it away for free.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Does it, you find
You have
yourself...
so my advice on this is you have to maintain your intellectual property statement. You have to say this is what I allow you to do. You can say I allow you to do this, and then you've granted them a license to do that.
I was just wondering if you guys have run into any problems. Or,
You have to judge the situation individually. If somebody's taking a strip and they're sharing it on their blog with their friends and they're linking to you, that's good for you. You want people to be getting the word out. You want them to be sharing samples. If somebody is taking every strip you've ever done, downloading it from your site, and creating an archive and charging for access, that's a no-no. So you kind of,
It's a case-by-case thing.
yeah, you make a policy that says if you want to post something, you have to ask for permission. Generally, people will send you an email, is it cool, and you'll say sure.
And remember that as time goes on, as time goes on, advertising revenue is increasingly going to be important as print advertising just nosedives. So, keep that in mind. And also, if the longer and the more folks are around your site, they're more likely to be directed toward your store. So,
The first thing my publisher said to me when I signed a book contract is, we've got to take it off the web.
Really?
Dude, we're not giving it away.
Yeah,
A
print
year
ads
from
are
now,
really-
we want people to pay $12.95 for it.
Did you?
I supported it.
yeah, and just as
That
a
makes sense to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just as a counter note to that, I'm currently, but not forever, on comics.com, and they limit the archives to 30 days, which to me is a death knell for webcomics, because you want to do everything you can to encourage fandom. And it's like a radio model. You give the house away for free so that somebody buys the album, So you give away every song that Blur ever wrote so that someone buys that Blur album. I don't know why I picked Blur, but anyway. So for me, limiting it to 30 days is like, it's newspapers all over again. Why would you want to do that? So that's the counter note to that.
I will say that one of the most important decisions we made when we started on Shelf was to make it available for delivery by email, because nothing is easier to send along than email.
Make it as easy as possible for people to get it, and your audience will grow tremendously.
That's
Yep.
right.
And make it easy for them to give you money.
Yes.
Comment on that, giving away an email.
Yes.
Make sure there's text with it, don't just send an image. Because 99% of the spam filter services out there, I run one, strip pure images.
Okay, so don't just send it, just put text
You
around
need to
it.
put some actual
That's
text
good
in there.
advice.
Buy
Okay,
penis enlargement pills under every inch.
webcomic, but then you print in black and white, do people feel like they're cheating because you're not getting the color, or are they fine with that?
So first of all, I disagree with the statement that the majority are color. On this panel, so I'm black and white, except for Sundays. I'm black and white, you're black and white.
Black and white, but Sundays,
Yours
yours
is
much. I'm color now.
Mine was mostly black and white. Actually, my use of color was interesting because they used it as a kind of a thematic element to kind of like the change from Dorothy experiences going from Kansas to Oz. I wanted color to mean something in the context of the story, and which is no problem on the web. You can color anything you want. When it comes to print, we actually ended up doing the whole book in 4-color, even though it's like 90% black and white, which added a lot of expense to it. But there wasn't any other way to do it. So it doesn't exact. It's not exactly germane to your question, but it can be a problem later again if you're thinking about print. It adds cost.
Yeah, certainly a reasonable consideration when you're planning your comic.
And keep in mind too that really, I think traditionally, really only the European tradition must have color. For Australians, for Canadians, for Americans, sometimes for the British, they're fine with black and white. It's a long-standing tradition, and it's a thematic choice. It's like a font or a handwriting choice. It gives a flavor to a strip for it to be black and white. It gives a flavor to a strip for it to be color.
I also think that one of the values of now I want to know if Phil had
Right. Okay. Now, you can take a color property and turn it into black and white, but you can't just cookie cutter the process. You've got to examine. Basically, you've got to transform each page and see whether it works. And if it doesn't work, you have to tweak it. Because there are some things that it'll look fine, it'll just look like shading, and then there are some things, well, this was a dark purple, and this was a dark blue, and this was a dark green, and it'll look great in color, and together it looks black. So, just assume that look at it with a fresh eye. Just don't assume that you can just like run a micro on it and process everything in one sitting.
Phil, is there anything else you wanted to add? Are we
No,
done?
I'm done. When I shut my mouth, I'm done. Really?
I haven't done a color collection yet, but some of my umbrella cohorts have. We have found that overseas printing reduces the cost of color printing considerably. So if you are willing to have, small foreign children work on pennies a day, you can get around those high printing costs. We've been doing stuff through Hong Kong and through Quebecor and stuff like that. And you can get the cost per book down pretty low. One of the advantages of self-publishing is that because you don't have a lot of the distribution and middleman stuff going on, you can spend a little bit more on the actual product and still make a higher profit from it because no one else is sharing the money with you.
My vote for black and white is that if you're just learning the craft, just starting on your strip, it is faster to do black and white.
Yeah.
And you can always add color later.
Yeah, color hides a lot of problems with people's art. They, will have terrible line work and then use color to kind of spice it up so maybe you won't notice. If you do black and white for a while and you get your line down, the color will only improve it. It will not, kind of just be it's like
10,000 grades.
Yeah, I mean, you can paint a nice shade of green on a piece of shit, but it's still a piece of shit.
And no more lens flare. Just as Photoshop has a lens flare button, you need to use it.
Speaking of getting started on a comic, do you guys think it's better to have your own website or get onto a comic website like KeenSpot or something?
Start your own. Are there any other votes?
I don't have any necessarily philosophical differences with either. I think to echo John's eloquent point, doing it on your own, you learn all the little bits and pieces that you need to know. I mean, eventually, if you're going to hand off bits of your business to someone else, you should have done it at one point yourself, so you know what something is worth, and so you know if it's being done right. And if you join a collective right away, you might not necessarily know that. But being part of a collective kind of answers his question in terms of how do I get known, how do I get it out there, and so there's that point too.
I think the most important thing is that you have your own domain.
Oh yeah.
Because you need the flexibility to change your hosting situation later. So I don't. Yeah. Yes.
On that note, about the communities like Comic Genesis, Buzz Comics, Drunken Duck,
quite understand that question.
I didn't think I understood it.
Okay.
Well, I will say this, one of the most wonderful things about webcomics versus traditional print comics is the communities they can form, both the support amongst the artists, the readers and the artists interacting, and then even the readers interacting with other readers. So that's probably given, and everybody in the room knows that, but I like to stay stupid at these events.
One thing I've noticed too is that we were talking before about tomorrow's subject, which is how you get your word out about your strip. The communities are very important for that, and I think I don't know anything about the specific communities you're mentioning, but it's good to be involved and tied into some kind of community. There's hardly anything more irritating on the internet than somebody who pops in somewhere and says, "I've never been here before, but I just did this webcomic. Go take a look at it." You want to be the person who's been around for a few months, a few years, had some intelligent things to say about other things. You know, they feel like they're your friend, and not in a cynical way like someday this will pay off from a webcomic. You know, you really ought to care about comics if you're going to bother doing them, and you maybe ought to want to be a part of that. You know, so I think it kind of naturally evolves that. Then, 2 years down the road, after you've had some smart things to say about comics, and then you say, guys, go take a look at this. They'll be a lot more inclined to look at it and give you good feedback.
All right, you had a question, Green.
I don't know how else to phrase this, but I've been down the avenue where I've done traditional print myself, self-published a couple times. Found out that my wallet doesn't go as far as I would like it to. Spent a lot of times at cons trying to peddle my self-publishing work and hitting the Visine about 20 times a con, trying to stay awake, trying to push it. And I'm at the point now where my buddy goes, "You just need to turn to webcomics, you need to get it out there." So I'm at the point now of trying to figure out with my work is if I prepare it for color work, which is what I would really love to do in the future, would Diamond, if you go through Diamond like you did, would the advanced orders pay for the color?
That is not a given in any way.
Okay,
shape, or
that's
form.
what I'm thinking.
No. Diamond these days actually is getting, they're a monopoly now. They're getting pretty snarky about what they will and will not carry. You have to, I think if you're a brand new talent, you have to show them a, at least Xerox's finished book, show because they have they used to solicit, pretty much you just send in the solicitation and they do it. Now they want proof that the book is actually done. It's there, it's ready to be printed. Ideally, they'd like 2 or 3. And they are not shy about saying, "Ha-ha, go back to art school, kid," or, don't even bother. They are, the Diamond catalog that goes out to comic book stores, it's like the Manhattan phone book. And some poor guy has to go through it every month, and their eyes bleed. So Diamond is trying to keep, amazing bread mold stories out of there.
So the webcomic basically is a really good way to go if you're looking to reduce the amount of funds that are going out of your wallet initially.
Absolutely.
Out there.
It's also a good way to see if a project has legs. If you
That's
want to
true.
go that way.
Baby, you stink.
No, I didn't say that. The thing is that Diamond isn't necessarily a part of this equation. I sold 5,000-6,000 books before I ever talked to Diamond, just through our website and through other stuff. Diamond is one channel to comic stores, but direct sales.
And direct sales for all of us are more profitable, or at least for me.
Yeah, because the thing I was confused on, because I was talking to several people about it, and cut this short, but some people said, well, pay Yahoo, pay Google to up your website up there, get it on top of the search list engines, try to get it pushed. Try to talk to other people, try to get it out there. But listening to that statement, it doesn't sound like it's any cheaper than going the normal route of just paying for the publishing. So
We'll talk more about this tomorrow, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So I think time for maybe 3 more questions. So yes.
Unless you have, say, merchandising, like in your case, or future print, is there any way to make money off of sending your comic in an email?
That's like saying, well, if I don't feel like working, how can I still make money? I mean, you have to do stuff to make money. So one of those things is merchandising. These are, that's the best.
That's why I'm asking.
Way to make money. There are other revenue streams. Sure, you can do subscriptions. You can do advertising. There's probably a couple other things, but why exclude that? Why not start with that?
In the White House.
What about a PDF download so people can print out your comic for a small charge?
Yeah, what do you think about high resolution images that people can download and print so they look nice?
For me, that just wouldn't work in my business model. A good way to look at it is would I as a reader want to do that? And for me, I can't see myself at home going, yeah, inkjet printer, yeah, we're looking good now. If I'm going to read it on the web, I've become a child of the web. I like to read things on the web now. And if it's going to be high quality, I want it to be a high quality print from a reputable, $500,000 print operation. So for me, it just doesn't work as a reader. That's one of my gut response. I can't imagine why anybody would want to buy a PDF and they can look at it on the web. It's like if you want a nicely printed collection, like a collectible, that's one thing. But how much would you charge for something like that? And would it be worth someone's while to pay that money to download a PDF to then use up all the toner in their printer? It just seems a little convoluted. I would rather let people download it for free.
I don't know if that's a fundamentally flawed idea. To me, it's the technology of the PDF and how you print it and read it and so forth. It's less interesting to me than how you pay for it. And then you start talking about micropayments and things like that again. And they haven't worked the bugs out of that yet either, but I don't think that's fundamentally flawed either. I think maybe you're just 10 years ahead of your time.
I will say that PDFs and high resolution things are good for maybe giveaways. Like here's a poster you can print out and hang on your wall. Maybe people would like that.
Well, I was online recently and I just Googled online comics and there was a few that came up that said, download PDF for $2.99. So I didn't know if you guys had any experience.
No. All right, let's take one more.
What format should you save the webcomic in to post it? So that it would be fairly quick to load. When somebody clicks on your site and they don't want to wait a long time for the.
Okay, so image formats, GIF, PNG, JPEGs.
It depends on what your image is. Like if you're doing something with lots of gradients and lots of colors and things like that, you might want to do it as a JPEG. If you've got lots of flat areas of color, black and white, GIF would probably work for you. Really, the size is going to depend on how much compression you do and how big the file size is. Dimensions and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different options. Play with it, figure it out. Oh, 72 DPI is web standard.
Okay, so.
But you probably want also to save the increment resolution copy, 600 DPI maybe.
600 for black and white, 300 for color.
1200 sometimes.
So I want to take a moment to talk about what's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to talk about building your audience, and obviously we touched on that today. We're going to have Tycho and Gabe from Penny Arcade, Scott Prince from PvP, Rich Stevens from Diesel Sweeties, and Chris Stroud from Star Slip Crisis. I forgot what room it is. It's in a different room than this one. Please help me thank our panelists for coming.
Nice, you got the whole thing.
I have some stickers. If anybody wants stickers, come up and get them. All right, thank you very much.
Give me a sticker, please. Yeah, I've been plugging away in a cutting room like half. I have about 7 minutes of tape left. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Karen? How's your time been so far?
Damn it!
What?
I'm trying to take a picture and people keep walking in the way.
Oh my goodness.
There we go.
You know who she's supposed to be?
Jane, maybe, from Tarzan?
No idea.
I don't think that's something I kind of want to see, but I took a picture to share with Todd and Ray and them so that they can share in my...
Oh, they'll want to see.
Well, Todd will. He's a dirty son of a, He'd like...
No, I don't know.
As long as it's a woman, Todd's happy.
Yeah.
And though I have seen him hit on men. Have you? Yeah. At Josh's graduation party?
Oh yeah.
Or not party, but beer or bar crawl, whatever.
Pub crawl.
Pub crawl.
Is that what it was?
Sure. We went to two places. And Todd and Javi were hitting on anything. Street lamps, anything. They're letting it in. Maybe the was full was for the other one, the one before.
Huh. Well, we can check, I guess, when this line finishes. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna hold my breath. But what was my line from earlier? Oh yes. Time flies when you're hemorrhaging money.
Sure does. My bank account is hurting.
Yeah, but you still have a comma.
Mama's period.
You got taking footage of everything?
I'm just killing the rest of this tape. There's only like 5 minutes left now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I might as well kill the rest of this tape, start new tomorrow.
Start new one. Sweet. And you got the whole thing.
You should charge for that, Taylor.
I should.
Put it up online, like $5, webcomic.
Or like 15.
Or 15.
100.
That works too. Don't have to get a copyright issues.
Knowledge is priceless, so you're like, come on.
Get a phone call in the middle of the night.
Alright. Go to the subway, go to train AF, and there'll be a briefcase there with a tape in it. Leave your payment.
That's great, eh? Alright, is there anything else worth coming back to? Is there anything else you guys wanted to do like later tonight or?
No, I think I'm done for the day. This line started moving. It's moving a little bit now.
It's moving.
But I don't know that
they're having negotiations with the firemen.
Because maybe the other show that was in there just got out or something.
Maybe.
But it doesn't think it's moving now.
No, it doesn't. Interesting observation, Kenneth.
You're an ass. Nothing wrong with stating obvious facts.
There's Tales of the Rat Fink.
Is that airing, actually, or is that just an advertisement?
This movie turns rubber.
I remember those toys. You remember those toys?
Oh, so you're saying the main basement or the main area where people buy stuff is closed?
Yeah, the exhibit hall is closed. It closes at 7. But all this is still going. To the wee hours of the morning.
It's moving. You want to get on this?
I really just don't know where the end of the line is. Is it back there? Yeah, we can get in the back of the line and see if it goes anywhere.
Alright.
Mario?
Oh.
Alright. I say we give this experiment 5 minutes. And if it doesn't work in 5 minutes, they should have showed it in that.
Todd sucks.
Sorry.
One of our friends.
It's an inside joke.
Poor Ray, stuck in Yuma.
I know.
And he could have been here.
Hugging Rosario Dawson.
No kidding.
Oh, he sent me a text message saying that someone else is gonna be here and that they're hotter with G4 or something. He gave me the time and the booth or something.
Come on now. Hotter? Honestly.
Oh, I don't know if that's possible. Olivia Munn is hotter, signing 1 to 2 p.m. tomorrow at G4 area. Also live broadcast at 8. Maybe I'll see you on TV. Is that 8 in the morning though? Because no.
It's 10. So it'd have to be 8 at night. So like they're doing a talk or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are we committed to this if this works?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, I'll watch
sandwich.
this. Yeah.
I'll watch this.
I'll steal some of his sandwich.
I may have to cut out.
What?
Drop some.
I mean all of his sandwich. What's not?
You have to get some Starbucks.
man furry, a cat man, if you will. He's got the tail.
I didn't see him.
When this guy walks by, it's right behind him. On the phone, next to the chick in the pink.
Oh, he does have a cat tail.
Need a pen? That's just wrong.
Come on, 1 minute left.
I hope he gets something spectacular in that last minute.
Yeah. Or as soon as it says tape end, something just explodes.
Tape ends is about your panther, like, you know, this huge woman in spandex.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do have another tape, but I don't think my reload time is going to be that fast.
What I was meaning was that, you know, it's actually so ugly, but not really.
Yeah.
Tape ended.
You're right. You're right. Tape was.
Who likes kung fu, honestly? I mean, at a
Such
comic
a small
conference,
target audience.
I mean, there's no way it would need a huge audience.
Yeah, jeez. Jeez Louise.
Comic book geeks, comic book fans, they hate kung fu. All that athleticism.
What screwed it up was Carpenter when he did Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Is that kung fu?
Or it's the first American type.
The first American.
Yeah.
Man, it's all about Jet Li's movie back when he was still in China. And he has my favorite one is
It's all about your mom when
Fist
I
of
told there's no
Legend.
more food in the fridge.
And he's got a British accent because it's dubbed.
It's pretty bad.
I think it's hilarious. It's
Do you have
hilarious.
pretzel? Have you eaten? Do you have food?
pretzels? I don't have
They got pretzels over there.
I'll just wait until after this. This is what, an hour?
Yeah.
It's like 3